All right, welcome everybody in Racelogic world. I got one of my good buddies, Robby Bilbrey, on tonight. Robbie, how you doing?
I'm doing good, staying pretty busy. St- thankfully staying inside the building, not have to go outside in this heat. I know everybody's suffering from that these days. So,
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. It's 102 here today, and I come home and crashed out for about 15 minutes. Unusual, but how is the shock business, Robbie? How's it going?
it's good. We're really busy right now. This time of year we stay about when people order stuff or send stuff in, it's a full set. We're a couple of weeks backlog, and that kind of ebbs and flows because what we try to do is when the guys are they tear one shock up or two, we try to get them in and out, put them in front because they're already racing and they want to get back going. So that's what kind of dictates the time frame, and we always try to do better. You have good days and bad days. Some days you'll build four sets, and some days you'll build one, just depending on what kind of issues you might have.
Right. Robbie, for the ones out there viewing, I know we got them usually from Oregon all over the country. Uh, give us a short background of you and what you do. I mean, I know it naturally. Met you several years ago, and I'll tell this before I get some info out of you. You was on the other side of a classroom one time, and I'll never forget it. And I kind of knew your name, and everybody there's like, "What's Robbie doing here?" Well, I'll never forget this, and this is why I came after you. You're like, Brian, I can always learn something. So
Right.
that really impressed me with you. And but kind of give everybody out there kind of a background of yourself and just a short something so they'll kind of know who Robbie is and what you do with RPI.
Well, I've raced my entire life. I started racing when I was 4 years old. Raced go karts and motorcycles and motocross, flat track, and then started racing mini modifieds and got into late models. Raced late models for many years, and then went to college and didn't race for quite a long time. And then once I got out of school and got established, had a pretty good job, I decided to start racing again. It had probably been um, probably 10 years, maybe 10 years since I'd been in a car and I was going to get back in a late model. And so, education to me is something no one can take away from you. You can always learn something. It doesn't matter what you do. So the first thing I did, I raced about 6 months and realized that the cars had changed a lot since I got out of them. We were just in the beginning of 4 bar stuff for a couple of years, and in 10 years they progressed a lot. So after about 6 months after that first year, I went to Dale McDowell driving school and took my car because I knew that you don't know everything, and it doesn't matter how smart you think you might be. There's always somebody out there that can teach you something, and that was probably the best money I ever spent to get back behind the wheel because I went with Dale and um, Shane was there, and Ray Cook was there also. So, I had my car there. So they took my car, went through the car, showed me, all the adjustments we might make. And, went out there and went to Cleveland and, rode around the two city with Dale. He said, do this, do this, do this. And I got in my car and we probably ran 200 laps that day. And by the end of the day, I was running just as fast as Dale. And because he's a very good teacher, very good instructor, and Ray was good with helping, and Shane's good at telling you what this adjustment should do. I'm going to do this to the car, and you go out there and run 5 laps and tell me what you're going to do. So that's kind of how I've always done what I've done, and we raced for many years, and I guess in '98 went to the PRI show, and my background is I'm an engineer, and so we were at the PRI show walking around, and I saw Rory. They had a dyno there, and I had a shock on it. So I went up there and asked them what they're doing and what the system machine did and all. And they explained a little bit to me. And I said, well, I'd like to buy one. They said, well, we really only sell them to cup teams, but if you really want one, we'll make an exception. So I got one. I think my dyno was number 59 or 60. So for the next couple of years, I just built my own shocks and learned. There were no schools to go to. Nobody taught you what to do. I was good friends with um, the guys that own Advanced Shocks, Corey and Chet Phillips, because they're from San Angelo, Texas, and I grew up racing with them. So after about 6 months of messing, taking stuff apart, I called Chet and said, or called Corey and said, hey, I'd like to come up there, be a dealer of your shocks. Do you have any kind of program you can teach me how to build your shocks? So I went up there and you know, they spent about 5 minutes with me, and there really wasn't a whole lot they could teach me because it was such a niche business. Then they weren't really interested in teaching you a lot. You know, just this is how we take them apart, this is how we put them together. So basically, I did trial and error, and would build the stuff and go race it, build the stuff and go race it. And thing where I was racing against guys, and they would like they knew I was building my own shocks, and they would like, "Will you build me a set?" I said, "Sure, but I'll sell you this set." So I sold a lot of shocks off of my race car, and then that kind of turned into a business. And about the same time, Rick Dewberry and I started Race Products Incorporated, and which is a parts business. We were taking the trailers to Talladega and to some big races to East Alabama and things. One thing led to another, and we kind of got busy doing parts, and then I got real busy doing shocks, and it was really tough to race against the guys I was building shocks for because they would, come back with, "You're not building me the same stuff you're building you," and things like that. And I said, "Well, these are for sale, and you can buy these or what have you." So I still did a lot of that, but then it got to where it's so busy I couldn't race and build shocks because you have to, if you're building a lot of shocks, you don't have a lot of time to pay attention to the detail on your race car. So it kind of just turned into we had a car for testing and things like that, and that turned into my, you know, building shocks turned into what I did at night rather than work on a race car 80, 90, 100 a week. I built shocks, and that's kind of what we're still doing, you know. And as far as the going to your class that time, I'd watch some of your classes, or was aware of some of your classes, and that's the reason I went, because I don't. I feel like no one knows everything. I don't know everything. You can always learn, and every time we do a class, even though I'm a part of your class now, I always learn something. You know, um, I teach at a local university here, UAH, and every time you do a class there, you learn something from students. If you're open minded enough, you can always learn something, and it's once you learn something, no one can take it away from you. And that's just kind of how I've always kind of tried to model, you know, my career, or anything that you do. You can always learn from somebody, and try to be open minded, and I approach racing like that too. You have guys call me, a lot, what they want, the magic setup or something like that. And there's really no magic setup, because everybody drives different, every car is different, every track's different. And so we really try to focus on the individual about what they like, and where they're racing, what kind of car they're on, what kind of tire, that's kind of, kind of how we try to do everything. We treat everybody like we wish we'd have been treated when we were racing. You want to be treated like you're, important, or you're the person working with you is interested in, when we try to do that. And it works out. We have a pretty good clientele. We're very fortunate to stay busy.
Yeah. Robbie, what's interesting, and I think you'll agree with this. You and Wade's my two guys for a long time, and you guys are totally opposite ends of, he's up north and you're down south. But I think at the end of the day, you both kind of think the same way in a lot of things, how you take care of customers. And something I always remember is, if you're buying a set of shocks and the guy on the other end is not asking you 50 questions, or whatever the number is, then you probably don't need to be buying shocks from him. You need to move on. And I think you'll agree with that. This is kind of what you said. I know Wade's always said that if you're not, if they're selling you something right there off the shelf and they don't even know what kind of car and what you're doing, I would say you probably need to move on to something else. Do you agree?
Right. Yeah, we don't have anything on the shelf ready to go, because of that. We try to build everything, for that individual. Now, I'll say, and we're lucky. We build shocks for guys all over the United States and Australia and England. We're really fortunate. And so, there's a consistent, or there's some similarities to guys racing at Wynot, or guys racing at Moulton, or guys racing at Talladega, or guys racing up at Lernerville, Pennsylvania. There's some consistencies, or some similarities, because the track surface and the tire they're on are, but some guys drive different. And not a lot, but I'll have guys, if I've not seen them drive, you send me a YouTube video, and I can watch that YouTube video and learn a lot by watching, and then talking to them and understanding what they feel, or how they think they're driving. And it's, that's really important. I've got late models that Corey Posey drives, and that's kind of how I stay up to date with what's going on in that world. And I've got some guys that I work very closely with that have modified and street stocks, that some manufacturers that I work with, that keeps me up to date with all the things they're doing, because you can't, like I've said earlier, you can't know everything, and you always want to try to learn, because seems like this the shock world, every 6 months, every 3 months, where we've learned something that what we thought we knew wasn't as great as it is. So we maybe go backwards, or we may evolve and make things a little bit better. So it's always it's a moving carrot, and that's what makes it fun for me. It's not as exciting as getting to drive and race, but it changes all the time, and you're always learning and always trying to get faster. And that's the competitive part of it all. And back to Wade. Wade's a great guy. He and I talk on the phone every now and then. He helps me with stuff that are in street stock related, or are component related. So he's a really, he's a good guy that I'll talk to from time to time, and he'll call me from time to time. And really, there's about 6 or 7 shot guys that we all, we kind of communicate with one another, and folks might think that we're real competitive with one another. I'm not, and they're probably not either. But
Right.
it's a small group of guys, that there's hundreds of guys out there shock builders, but some of us that have been doing it for 10 or 15 years, we kind of stay in touch with one another, because it's a fortunately it's a sport or situation where there's such a big piece of pie out there. There's enough room for everybody to be involved in it, and nobody can say I've got all the business or want all the business, because it's just that's what keeps you on your toes. Competition. you know
Sure.
I've got the guys up at War. They're great guys, and if they're start winning races, and you want to start trying to build some stuff to outrun those guys. It's a friendly competition, and that's what for me anyway. That's what keeps it interesting for me, because it is a hobby. It's not by any means how I make my living. So I am allowed to enjoy it, and it doesn't cause me any stress. I know people, and the guys at the college invocations that tell you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. They're full of crap, because
Right.
when it becomes your job, it is a job. And so, I'm a contractor, and so when I'm in between contracts, I might go 2 weeks, it might go a month before the next contract, engineering contract. And sometimes I've had to do it for a living, and it's not fun, because you got to produce, so much a day. So I'm lucky that it allows me to do it as a hobby, and keeps it fun. I mean, I don't ever get tired of, I don't ever get tired. I could stay up here 24 hours a day if you ask my wife, because I just enjoy building shocks and learning, and I'm always learning something. It doesn't matter if you've done something 100 times, you always can find or think of a better way to do it, or a better way to get to a force number you're looking at. And it's a challenge. A customer will call and say, hey, run your stuff, and we're having this issue. Can you fix it with the shock? Well, I think I can, and then we'll build something, and analyze it, and we might go test, or we might just go put it on and race it. And if you've done your homework, and have done, your analysis correct, you might get lucky, and a squirrel, I can tell guys, a squirrel gets a nut every now and then. So, that's what keeps it fun for me.
Right. Robbie, I know you build about every brand of shock, but I know you're a big Bilstein guy too, and I know Wade. that's why I think I was going back to that just because I know both of you guys really well and trust both of you. But I know you've done some R&D stuff and some Lucas Oil stuff, and just I mean I know you do asphalt and sprint cars, and there's really drag racing. There's really not much shock related that you don't do. Am I saying that right?
You're correct. Yeah, we do all kinds of stuff. The really wild stuff that we do that's kind of unconventional is in England they go in the other direction, and so they call it grass racing, and they race cars that some of them are rear engine cars and some of them are kind of like the hobby cars or street stock cars, and those are pretty interesting cars to work on because the philosophy is a little bit different when you're turning the opposite direction, and they're on really flat tracks and little small skinny tires with high horsepower stuff. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, we're fortunate that we build pretty much anything. We do UTV stuff. We do a lot of road race stuff, a lot of TA2 stuff, and it's just by word of mouth that you racing is a small group of people. If you do someone a good job, they're going to tell their buddies, and they may be in a completely different type of racing. But fortunately, we've got a good really good customer base. Many different things. It's every day. I mean, we met. Today I built stuff for TA2 cars and Formula Fords and some dirt late model stuff and some asphalt stuff. So, it's not the same thing every day. It really never gets boring because of that variety. And every one of the disciplines are different.
Right. And Robbie, we'll see. I haven't had any questions pop up, but if you guys got a shock question about any type car or whatever, Robbie's here. I tried to grab these guys about 30 minutes at a time because I know they're busy. So if you got something that you're looking at, shock or setup or anything, really don't matter. I mean, what type car, whatever. We would field a few questions if you need it. Just a couple of comments, Robbie. It's really really good for you and me both. That somebody put two good guys right here. Thanks for all you do, Robbie. So. And then I bet I know who said this. It said the world in general needs more people like Robby Bilbrey. So kudos to you, Robbie, for that. So,
well, all you have, is your reputation and your word, and if, I I tell somebody something, I try to do it, and there's a lot of guys in the world, in the shock world, that don't do that and give shock guys a bad name, and so all we can do is try to do, like I said earlier, treat people like we'd want to be treated, because it's people can take their money anywhere they want to, and I try to tell folks when, they'll call me and they want to know, well, what kind of big name guy do you do this for? I really don't name drop unless the guy says it's okay, because to me, everybody's just as important as that guy running Lucas or that guy running World of Outlaws or running the sprint car stuff or the TA2 guys. They're all important. And if you get starstruck and worry about who the big name guys are, you're not going to be paying attention to the details, because they need something different than a local guy.
Sure. Well, Robbie, I was fortunate. Like I said, I'll wait a few minutes, see if I got any questions, and they're fixing to have here. But I was fortunate enough, like I said, to meet you a few years ago. Shot guy I used for years, kind of got out of the business, and then me and you hooked up on some stuff. I know you've done all my late model stuff, and usually anything the Southern street stock tile stuff, you've always came in and done a great job. And what I always liked about it is like you said, integrity. And I think me and you've got a lot of the same traits. You try to do what you tell people. You try to be honest, and you want to help racers. And that's just hard to find anymore. And that's why I try to keep you guys under my umbrella as much as I can, because this racing deal is hard. It's expensive, and it's hard to find people honest. So yourself and Wade and Ben and just the guys that I do these deals with, we all share the same thing. Really, at the end of the day, that they want to help racers, and you don't have to worry about ever hearing that Robbie took somebody's money, didn't build his shocks, or Wade, or any of that kind of stuff. And that meant a lot to me. So.
Well,
Robbie, go ahead.
I can tell you got a good group of guys, you know, that with everything, and I mean, I'm thankful every time you invite me to do that, because it's, you know, just the friendships I made with Dave and with Ben, and Ben, you know, Ben is a he's a wealth of knowledge of all the different things he's done at AFCO and different things, and very easy to talk to, and you know, Dave has forgot more than a lot of us will probably know, you know. Because he's been around racing a long, long time. And so you've got a good group of guys, and I'm just happy to be able to come in and help a little bit, you know.
Well, I appreciate that. We do got a question here. I know you'll be able to read it. It says, tell us some of the difference between shocks for heavy springs or soft springs, street stock or factory stock. So I guess they're wanting to know the difference, what you would do shock wise from a soft to a heavy spring.
So a lot of times, you know, and the philosophy has been forever is you want to run the softest spring you can to hold the car up, and so more so now than we were probably 15 years ago. And I'll talk. We use the shocks more as mechanical devices, like we're really tying the right front down and trying to hold the left front up. And you may or may not need as much spring as you once did, where if you're running a heavy spring, say, let's just say you're on a 1300 right front spring on a factory stock, you may not be getting but about an inch of travel. But you're getting, let's just say you're getting an inch of travel with 1,300 pound spring. You got it pretty on an inch. You're at 2,600 pounds. Well, if you have a soft right front spring at 800 and you travel at 400 pounds, you're getting close to the same rate of 2,600 pounds of energy you're trying to control there. So the shock may not be a lot different on rebound, but the compression side will be more, because you're going to try to slow that car down from maybe bottoming out. And then of course you want to keep the nose pinned as much as you can too. Same thing on the right rear. You know, if you're running a heavy rough racetrack, you want to go to a softer spring, but you want to have more shock, more compression in the shock, to let the shock handle the ruts and all. Very similar to what we do on the off-road stuff. You see the off-road trucks and things where they're going through, looks like 3-foot whoops, and the tires are moving up and down. It looks like, and the car is very stable. Well, they don't have a lot of spring, but they've got a lot of shock, and it gets progressively stiffer as it speeds up and slows down. So things like that on a rough track, you'd want, you know, like I said, softer shocks and stiffer compression shocks, and probably a little bit more bleed in them. So those are the, I guess, kind of the two different scenarios and why what you do with soft springs and or stiff springs, you know, depending on your application. So without knowing what exactly you're trying to do, I hope I kind of answered that a little bit.
Yeah, I believe you did. Uh, but I know just me reading, because I always read a lot on Facebook and different things, and I know the heavy springs and soft springs kind of came back up again, and I don't know that I've necessarily seen that in the last few years, but it seems like here lately, and I don't know why, right? Maybe something that you know more about, but it seems like some guys are kind of going back, checking out that heavy spring deal on a lot of different cars. Is that something that they're looking at out there now where they used to wouldn't?
Well, I think, you know, and I tell guys all the time, you can line up 10 race cars at the racetrack, and they may be all capable of winning. Guarantee you they're all on a little something different. And I've got guys that are on stiff springs, and I got guys on soft springs. You know, uh, there's you know, just let's take for example a factory stock. I'll tell you something that we do on a factory stock is, because you know, and even on some of the street stocks, you can't run bump stops a lot of places. So our guys are having to stiffen up their spring a little bit to try to get the same rate that they were getting when they were traveling 4 inches with the really soft stuff in a bump stop. So what we did, we went on some guys, we went back really old school. We'd run a 1,500 pound right front spring, but drop the ride height about 3 inches so the car looks like it's rocked over on the right front. You run a 1,500 pound spring traveling about an inch. You're 23, 2,400 pounds, and you still got a right front shock that's got quite a lot of reach that'll kind of keep it pinned down. But you're running a stiffer spring, and you're not traveling far, and you're not on a bump stop. And guys have been winning races like that. So, but then they're the same. A guy right beside him might be on a 750, and really traveling 4 inches. And the final numbers, their numbers are going to be very similar. So, those two guys might swap cars, and they may hate the way the car's set up, but the other guy, it fits his driving style. So, that's on the right front stuff. The right rear stuff, we've got guys that we're going back to a 225 and then our 250, and maybe going to what's called a TH spring, which is a tight helix spring. The rates are the same, but the tight helix spring has more coils, and so it's got more. I call it like more soldiers holding up the car. If you rate it on the spring rater, it's still 225 or 250, but you're distributing the load of much coil so it can hold the car up more. It holds like the car with a 250, 25 spring like we see now that's not tightly wound. That car might travel 4 inches. Put the tight helix spring on there, it may only travel 2.5 or 3 inches, and the car will pick up some side bite. It's not necessarily a spring, but it has more coils to distribute the load. And that's a big thing a lot of guys are doing. Modifieds, late models, stocks. It's kind of it's all over and asphalt stuff. 500, 600 pound right rear springs on those things now. So it's like every it kind of ebbs and flows. A guy thinks about doing this running fast, he's gonna kind of trying to mimic it, and that's of course always changing. We're always trying to be fast, and a lot of times we'll go back to doing the same things we were doing several years ago, and think, man, we stumbled onto something nobody's ever done. Well, probably not. We're probably just redoing something that somebody brought back, but it does happen. Guys go back and forth to soft stuff, and
Yeah.
everybody fits everybody differently. There's not, like I said earlier, there's no magic setup that makes everybody fast.
Robbie, I guess I'm waiting to see if we got any more questions, but what shock do you probably build the most? Would it be a Bilstein? I mean, is that probably your most common?
Really, for the street stock stuff, that's what I build mostly of, because it's the most economical, and performance wise, I use the same pistons, and Wade does too. We use the same pistons in those shocks as we use in the late model stuff, right? So, and that's really the trick with the Bilstein stuff is the piston. I do, when you're looking at late model and crate stuff, it's probably, it's all three. I do a lot of Olin's, Penske, and Bilstein stuff, but it's kind of it's pretty equal with all those brands. But when it comes to street stocks and modifieds, those are the Bilstein is probably is what I sell the most of. And really, it's the least expensive, but it's also, in my opinion, the best. And I build them all. It's probably for the street stock stuff. It's some of the best stuff out there. So when a guy calls, that's what I recommend. If I've got a 602 car, I'm gonna put Bilstein, steel body shocks on it, because that's what I feel like's the best.
Uh, I got a quick question here, Robbie. It says, what do you think about a right rear spring on a street stock? Yeah, right rear spring on a street stock with a big right front spring. What right rear shock valving would you pair with it?
So with the right rear, it's got a big spring on it. I'd probably have what I call a low bleed digressive type setup. So it does, as the spring compresses, the spring's doing the work. The shocks just kind of dampening the energy. You don't want the shock to keep building forward. It blow off in a deal like that. So it would be, the valving would be, like I said, it's a digressive valving. You might have it it'd probably be a 200, which would be your 10-inch number, and the bleed I'd call it a low bleed. And when I say a low bleed, you're looking at probably a 6 or 3. And I don't, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but the bleed numbers, but it's a pretty low bleed, and the shock would have a fat nose on it. It wouldn't be linear. If you've been to our class, it's a digressive valving where it builds force, and then if you're looking at the graph, it straightens out. It doesn't keep building force at an angle up toward the sky. It just kind of, we call it blows off, and so that kind of thing with a heavy spring on the right rear, because the spring, you're asking the spring to do the work more than the shock.
Yeah, and this is a guy, Robby, he's been to some of our classes down south. He went last year. This kid, I think Wade does his shocks for him and stuff. And he wins about every night. He sits in a street stock in Illinois, but he kind of reminds me of you. He always goes every year. And I asked him this year, I said, Robert, what are you doing here again? Because he's been 3 or 4 times. And he said, man, I can always pick up something. I always want to learn one more thing. So that's why he keeps winning, because he's always asking a question and wanting to know. And, he's always been a part of this. So good racer.
The very first class that Mark Richards put on his Race-Wise thing, or whatever it's called, back in the 90s at Larry Shaw's place, I went to it, and Billy Morey was in there, Wendell Walsh in there, Bill Fry was in there. There was like 6 or 7 full-time racers there, and I thought they were plants, right? And it's a 3-day deal, and I, they asked more questions than most anybody in class, and it's because they didn't know everything either. They've been out on the road, and nobody ever told them what to do or what not to do, and a lot of it, they wanted to reassure themselves that they were doing the right thing, and then a lot of things they realized that they weren't maybe doing the right thing according to what Mark Bush said, and so that tells you that even those guys are interested in learning, and interesting story. I got set with Bill Fry one day during lunch, and he was winning a lot of races, and he was a smooth driver and all. And I asked him, because he talked a little bit about to some guy how clumsy he was. He couldn't chew bubble gum and walk and things like that. And so I asked him, I said, well, if I heard you telling those guys that. I said, how did you become so good at, driving as straight and as smooth as you do? He said, I'm a farmer. And he said, so I drive up and down the road a lot. So I made myself concentrate on trying to stay exactly in between the white lines of the road everywhere I went. It didn't matter if I was going 30 miles, 45 miles an hour around the turn or driving straight. He said, I tried to concentrate on keeping the car exactly in between those lines. And it gave him, his hand-eye, it built his hand-eye coordination in a way you wouldn't think, but that was the tool that he had back then, So those guys are, you might I would have thought he was just a natural, but when he wasn't driving the race car, he was practicing driving as straight as he could up and down the road, so that was a pretty interesting story from that deal. And I've always remembered that,
Yeah. I mean, Bill Fry did win a lot of races back in the day, and he's only 2 or 3 hours from me here, and I watched him a lot growing up. But you were right. If you ever seen him walk around, he does kind of look clumsy, just a big old country guy. But he won a lot of races.
He got size 28 feet, and he's big. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you remember he's the one that run over. You remember when Bloomquist run over him at the and he did retaliate a little bit, if you remember.
Well, they also said that was the race. They said that Bloomquist accused him of having 4-wheel drive.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if that truth ever came out or not. I don't know. I've heard that at Batesville too. I've seen him come off the back. He changed tires like 3 or 4 times to come off the back, and I think he ended up winning it even. That was Topless 100 20 years ago, but it was crazy. But
Yeah.
I'd always heard that 4-wheel drive deal. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, but I can't imagine.
Yeah, I know for a fact that Jerry Inman over here in Mississippi, he did have a 4-wheel drive car,
Huh.
and he was
Um,
fast. He still got the parts over there too. It was a fast race car back in in the 70s.
oh, wow. It was a long time. They were way ahead of their time back then, wasn't they?
Yeah, them farmers, their ingenuity is like nobody else's because they gotta fix stuff when nobody else knows how to fix it when they're out in the middle of the farm. So
Yeah. Yeah. They're working on a tractor broke down somewhere and they got to get that corn out of the field or whatever. They got to do whatever they got to do to fix it.
right, yep.
Uh, Robbie, if guys are going to get in touch with you, if they're looking for a shot guy or something, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Just the best way is to call me. My number is 256-505-2361. That's my cell phone number, and please leave a message because a lot of times I can't get the phone, but if you message I'll definitely call you back and love to work with you and help you out with a shop package and when we sell a shop package, we try to sell a system, a setup. We're going to recommend what springs and your percentages and the tech support comes free. I get guys call me all the time. I'll be at the racetrack. I'm probably at the racetrack somewhere. So Fridays and Saturdays is kind of tech support. I'm trying to help guys with at the racetrack and that's all part of the shop package. We don't charge extra for that. We don't do consulting things like some guys do. I just feel like that if you're spending your money with me on shocks, then I owe you the technical support that I can, and everybody's different. I mean, not like I said, one what works for this guy at Moulton's not going to work for this guy up at Lernerville on any given night, and
Right, right.
we can
Well,
try your program.
we're looking. I know I talked to you a little bit. We'll be back down south again doing a street stock deal with Chad Thrash, which
Right.
I know you told me that he's one of the. He's been on this game for a while now. And a good guy. And I
Yeah,
think that'll be a great class, don't you, Robbie?
I do. I do. I think it'd be a real good class, and their cars are winning races right now, and he's that's a good family. I've known them. I used to race the Mississippi State Series, and his dad still runs that Mississippi State Series, and they were always good to me and fair, and so they're good folks.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. And then, it's still early, but I'd like to do another late model deal somewhere, somehow. I don't have anything yet on that, but
Right.
always in doing them.
Oh yeah. Yep.
He said, Robbie, one more time, somebody asked for your phone number, okay?
It's going to be 256-505-2361.
Okay,
Five
that's
six
good.
05-2361. And I'm on Facebook too. You can send me an SMS on Facebook. It's just sometimes I don't get on Facebook an awful lot, so sometimes I'll miss those for a day or so, because there's you know I I don't have time to get on Facebook. But
Yeah, well, you
call
work too much.
yeah, call's easier, so
Yeah, well, like I said, you got a full-time, pretty important engineering job during the day, and then I know you kind of told me your system before when I first met you, like, hey, Brian, usually till about noon, I'm doing my NASA stuff, and then after 12, and that still may be that way, I don't know.
it,
Then
it
you get in your shock deal.
yeah, usually anywhere from 12 to 2 every day is when done with my NASA work, and then I just since COVID we're working remote, so I have all my computer NASA stuff here at the race shop, so I just roll out a NASA code and put my working clothes on and go back in the back and start building stocks. So I'm pretty lucky right now at work. It's a whole I gained 2 hours because I'm not driving back and driving there and driving back here.
Right, gives you 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
Well, Robbie, like I said, I appreciate you coming on. We'll get you back on probably before class season starts up. But like I said, I always appreciate what you do for me. Been one of my best, and uh, you've always done what you said when you said it. And I know you helped a lot of racers, a lot of guys use you, and I know you're always open phone call away for a lot of them. So, we'll look forward to a couple more classes again this year.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to be as busy as you are and have the kind of customer base we have, and I appreciate you inviting me to do this and allow me to be on your team, because it's been a win-win for me. I learned a lot and I picked up some customers from it for sure.
Right. We might throw this one question out, Robbie. I was going to jump off, but I hate to leave one. When to change a left rear spring on a dirt late model, 80 pounds to 125 reasons.
So there's a couple of different, depending on what track you're at, depending on what if it's a super or a crate or whatever. A lot of times, depending on driving style, when the track slicks off, like this, take for instance a Magnolia gets really slick. When Magnolia slicks off, we might be at the beginning of that, we might be 125 pounds of extended load. So when you roll out of fuel a little bit, the car frees up and pick the gas up. So, but when the track gets really slick, we'll go down our extended load, so the car is a little snug as you burp the throttle and then pick the gas back up. Now there's other places where as the track slicks off, like maybe Duck River, we'll go up on our extended load on the left rear, just because you want to have drive coming off the corner because it's more banked and you're rolling around a bowl. So two different instances. So the way I look at it is, if I want the car to be a little more snug when I get off the fuel on corner entry, I'll take extended load out of it. If I need it to be a little bit freer, I'll put some extended load in it. And but there's always going to be a occasion where you need the car to be a little bit freer, but you need a lot more dig coming off the corner, and you might put more extended load in it. So it's kind of track dependent, kind of situation, and even driver dependent. But generally we'll take left rear load out and put right rear load in when it slicks off at most places, because they're common. The two are a combination, and people a lot of times don't think about the rear of the car. It's not a solid axle, but it's tied together through the ring gear and pinion. So everything you do to the right rear, dynamically, the left rear gets some of that. So if you up your load on the right rear, dynamically, the left rear is going to get a little of that load. And to kind of help people visualize that, if you've raced long enough and you've got a coilover car or any car weight jacks, I am sure you've jacked enough left rear weight into the car with a right rear spring probably isn't touching. That lets you know right there that the two are tied together. If you can put so much wedge in the car to lift the right rear up off the spring, that lets you tie together. I'll give you a little anecdote. Mark Martin won a ton of ASA races. He didn't have a spring or shock on the right. He had a shock and about a 1,500 pound spring left rear, and won a lot of races because that right rear left rear shared the blood. So he was way ahead of his time. I don't know that I've never talked to him. I've just listened to him tell the story. It was something they stumbled across, and it worked, and people thought they were crazy. But so that's why we add load to the take load out of the left rear. Well, a lot of times we'll add it to the right rear, and it makes the right rear scotch up more, on corner off there on a lot of occasions. And guys will say, well, why? That's going to be free when I pick up the gas. Well, it could, but about dynamically, that load in the right rear, some of it's going the left rear. If you scotch better on entry, you've got traction, and you're going to have that traction as soon as you start rolling back in the throttle. That's one way to look at. So
Right.
okay.
Well, hey, Robbie, some good questions tonight. And like I said again, appreciate you coming on. We'll jump back on here in another couple of months, toward the end of the season, and kind of check out what the classes look like this year. And everybody's got your number if you need to reach out to you. And Well, once again, I appreciate you, and have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Thanks for enjoying me.
Thanks, Robbie.
Getting out there. Thanks a lot.
All right, buddy.
Bye.